Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video what we're going to do is create a Deno project. So Deno is a new JavaScript runtime. With Deno, we're going to create a backend server type web app using the framework called Pogo. If you've seen my previous videos on Deno, you'll see me do a video where I did a little mini app, just like a Hello World app using Express, which is really Expressive is the name of the library. Oak, and Pogo, which are three of many already new web application frameworks. There's other ones like Deno, ABC. There's quite a bit already growing in the Deno ecosystem. So I'm going to create a project using Deno, and then we're going to take it to the extra step, which is deploying it, which we're going to use Docker. Okay, because right now there really isn't like a dedicated like Deno deployment service, kind of like how Heroku has like a fairly dedicated service for different types of apps. But there is a service that deploys Docker containers, which is called fly.io. So all you have to do is create a Docker container that runs Deno, and you can deploy it to fly.io actually really easily. So before I did this, I didn't know Docker. Now I do. So this has been a fun project, and it's actually pretty straightforward. Now it's up to you to install Deno on your machine. It's up to you to install Docker. And it's going to be up to you to set up your account with fly.io, which all three things are pretty straightforward. Just read their documentation on how to install it, you'll be fine. Okay, but here we go. So I started project 3, and the reason why these files are already here is because I did try to do this video before, but my computer froze. So let me just walk you through what I did so far. So convention is with Deno is that Deno uses ES6 imports. So in my previous video, I would just import everything as I needed it. So at the top of my files, I would have my imports that imported from different URLs, which is fine, that works. But the issue is if you have a really big project, as versions change, then I need to change these URLs, and I'll be changing them in like dozens of different places. So the convention is to create a file called deps. Could be deps.ts, deps.js, deps whatever. Mostly I've seen deps.ts. And what this is that it exports what you need from your different locations. So basically it grabs React and then imports it, grabs Pogo, then exports it. So that way when I pull in these things, I pull them in from this file, and that way if I need to update the versions, I just update them in this particular file. I can use this to cache the dependencies, and this way it just makes it a lot easier to manage my dependencies. So I'm bringing in React, which is, you guys know React, probably if you're watching this video, because Deno's not really a something you would do if you're new, and React is something you probably have learned before you're really kind of approaching this whole Deno topic, I'm assuming. Okay, Pogo is one of the many backend frameworks for Deno. Okay, I like Pogo out of the ones I've used so far, mainly because it has some very nice out-of-the-box React compatibility. You can use React pretty easily in Deno altogether. The only difference is like in the other frameworks, you'd have to bring in like the React DOM server library and make sure to run the convert to static markup function. This kind of does this automatically. That's what I like about Pogo. It just has that functionality built in. But there are some things that I found a little difficult in Pogo, so I made myself some functions to get around them. So to easily take the body, turn it to JSON, or to parse URL form data, to grab all the query data, I created some functions to do that. I'll probably release that as a library later, but maybe I'll push that up to GitHub, to a GitHub repository sooner than later, so that way people have access to that. But that's what I'm bringing in. Okay. Cool. And just a little preview in just case any of you guys need these functions. Here's my get body function that grabs the body but just grabs it as a string, and then the get JSON takes that same body and turns it into JSON. URL encoded takes a URL encoded data and parses that string. Get query grabs all the queries and puts them in an object, because by default the queries are stuck in a map and you have to use like search params.get to get an individual query, and it's kind of a pain. Cool. Okay, so that's that. Okay, so now I go to my server.jsx, since JSX, because I want to be using JSX. So I bring in React and Pogo, and again I'm bringing them from deps.ts, because I've exported those dependencies there, so I can just bring them in here that way. So this way, my dependencies are always using the same version across all my files, because they're all pulling them in from deps.ts. Okay, here I create my server, pogo.server. This is an important piece, regardless what framework you're using. It has to do with the way Docker works. To keep it simple is that it can be a little unpredictable what namespace your Docker container is serving from, or forwarding a request between the port, because again, what's happening here is that you're taking your application and putting in its own little like cubby hole that has its own sort of like internet ports and whatnot. So it's going to be serving at port 4000 in the container, and I need to be able to forward that traffic to a different IP address, but I'm not sure what that IP address is going to be. So if you do 0.0.0.0.0, it listens to all namespaces. So when we connect the container with the outside world, we don't have to worry about it. So this is just something you have to do generally in Docker. So whatever backend framework you're using, just make sure that the application host name is set. Okay, probably that's something you've done, unless you've used Docker, because by default everything's kind of like, you know, localhost and 127.0.01, and it just all works wonderfully. But here you need to do that, so just keep that in mind. So if for some reason it's not working, that's probably the reason why. Okay, so then here we're going to put one route, so it's server.router, because we created the server over here. Server.router.get, it's a root route. And then in Pogo, there's a request object, and then there's this helper object, which is essentially, it's kind of like the response object, but different. It has a bunch of functions to help you grab data and do things that are related to this response, but it doesn't have functions like res.send or res.json like an express. Instead of using a response function, you just return, and whatever you return, so if you returned an object, it would come back as JSON. If you were to return an HTML string, it would parse as HTML. If you were to return JSX, it parses it, it turns it into HTML, which is pretty neat, because then you can use React out of the get-go. You can create components in other files and import them in. It's pretty nice. Okay, so essentially, if I wanted to create components, I could just do the following. I'm just going to use some basic JSX as you see here. So here, and again, if you're not familiar with React, then you're probably not familiar with what JSX is. JSX is just a way of kind of writing HTML in JavaScript, but there's a lot of rules you have to know for it to work right, because of just what's going on under the hood. So in this case, see, there's only one parent element, a div, and then everything's inside the parent element. Okay, so we have a hello world h1 and a h2 deployed using Deno Dockerfile.io. And then here we have our listener. So we sit there. And the cool thing about Deno, it has top level await. So I can actually use await outside of a function. So what this does is that this function returns a promise, and it'll run this function, and it won't go any further until this function is done. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this console log right before it, just so I know I got to that point in the code. And again, where did I change I changed the port to 4000, so I want to make this port 4000. Okay, cool. And there you go. That's it. We have a basic hello world app. Okay, so again, it just basically created our server, created a route, started listening. That's it. Okay, so now I'm going to open up this folder in my terminal. And first thing we're going to do is test it out. So basically I just type in Deno run. So I'm going to run the file, but I have to give it internet access or it can't serve the file. So I have to do, because by Deno, by default, everything is turned off. Your application does not automatically have the ability to write and read files, the ability to read environmental variables, the ability to access internet ports. You have to enable these things in each individual call to that script. This way, it's secure. Okay, Deno run allow net, and then the file we're running is server.jsx. And this is going to take a second, because what's going to happen is that it's going to first read here, say, oh, React Pogo. Then it's going to head over to deps.ts. It's going to take a look at all the URLs and see, do I already have this library? Because every time it sees a URL that it hasn't used before, it takes a minute to download it and cache it. Okay, so it's going to do that first. So let's take a look. See right there, it's compiling. First it's compiling server.jsx. I've used all these dependencies before, so it shouldn't take too long. Deps.ts, so there, because it's linked, it goes to deps.ts. It's now crunching all of that, making sure that all that looks good. And we got an error. Let's see here. Pogo. Pogo, did you mean to use import Pogo from .ts module x Pogo? Wait a second, let's take a look over here. Did I write the wrong thing here? Yes. Module HTTPS Deno x Pogo has no export member called Pogo. Let's take a look at how I've used it before. Oh, I see. Okay. Boop, 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 boop. They're not destructured, that's why. So let me undestructure them. Deps. Okie dokie. Save. Let's try that again. Expected. For Pogo from, no, this should be fine. Well, I shouldn't have to do it this way, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to do this. Import React, import React. So I'm going to import those variables, and then I'm going to export them. This is a little redundant, but oh, I think I see why. It wants me to do that. I'll be right back. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm making this all imports, and I'm going to just export it separately. So I'm going to export default, and then just give it an object with all these things. React, Pogo, get JSON, just everything I plan on using. Get URL encoded. Although I'm not going to be really using these last few for this particular purpose, but I just get it all in there. Save. Why is it complaining about get body? Oh, did I not export it in here? Oh, I didn't. Okay. Let's do that. There we go. That should clean all that up. Otherwise, we should be good to go. Okay. So let's run that again. Deno run allow server.js x. So it's going to go compile my dependencies. Get body, it does. We just did that. Yep. Export const get body, so it does. So type between get body. No, but the simplest way to fix this, since I'm not actually using this function for this particular exercise, is just to do this. Okay. There we go. Let's run that again. Let's see the requested module deps.ts does not provide an export name Pogo. Yes, it does. Export default React Pogo JSON. Okay. Okay, so here's what I had to do. Okay, so my dependencies, I still exported a default an object, and then in server.js, I just imported that object as app, and then just destructured that app object. Not my favorite way I did things, but you guys get the point. So, again, now let's test out the app. So Deno run, allow net, there we go. Let's now see we're listening on port 4000. Good. So next, what I want to do is go try it out. Okay, so first we want to test out the app. First we want to make sure the app works before we make the Dockerfile. Because again, we always want to isolate what potential problems are. So we don't want to go too far. Okay, good. So the app works. Hello world deployed using Deno Dockerfile. So we made the app. That's the app. Okay, so now we need to create the Docker file. So in our project folder, we're going to create a file called Dockerfile with the uppercase D, Dockerfile. Okay, and the way this works is first we have to start with our starting image. I have an image I made. There's a couple already made by things like KD is the username on GitHub, and then I took what they did there and just created a new image that has Deno 1.0 installed on Ubuntu. So it should be Ubuntu Deno. I think it's Deno 1. Let me just double check my previous Docker file. Yep, Alex said Ubuntu Deno 1. Okay, so then what we want to do is say, okay, this image needs to expose port 4000 because this application is going to listen on port 4000, so we need to be able to connect to that port on the container. So we have to expose port 4000. Okay, once we expose port 4000, then we want to copy all, well, we need a working directory. Okay, you can just do /app. So it just makes a folder called /app. Then that's what this file is going to work out of. Okay, and then we want to copy all our files over. So we'll just copy. I want to copy all the contents of this folder, the folder that I'm in, into the working directory. So basically this into that. Okay, so this by default dot just means current. So current in this case would be my project 3 folder here, and the current in the container would be the app folder. So I'm copying all the files into that folder. Now before we make the image, so the idea is that at the end this creates an image that we can just run. But there's certain things I don't want to have to do every single time the image runs up, so I can run certain commands that'll run the command before it takes a snapshot. What I wanted to do is I wanted to cache all those dependencies before it does that. So we're going to do run cache or Deno cache deps.ts. So that'll run that. It'll cache all the dependencies ahead of time, so that way it doesn't have to download them every single time the container is spun up. Okay, then we're going to have entry point. Okay, which is just the command that it starts out with, which is just going to be Deno. You have to do each part of the command as a separate item in an array. So it would be Deno run allow net server .jsx and that will run that, and that should be it. Okay, that'll generate. Cool. Okay, so we have the Docker file. So now inside that folder, I'm going to build out the Docker file. So I'm going to do sudo docker build. Okay, -t, and the name is going to be Alex Merced /Deno test3, and I want to use the Docker file that's in this folder. So a dot for saying, hey, I want the Docker file in this folder. So this is gonna build that out. So see, it's basically building all those configurations. Okay, so now it's copying the files. Now it's running the cache, so it's going to cache all the dependencies. So there it goes. It's downloading all the dependencies. Oh, there's an error. I can't resolve module file pogohelper.jsx. Did I not have it in there? Non-zero code. I got to resolve that. Here's what I will do just to save us some time. I'm just going to delete that because we don't really need it for this project. Okay. So let me just take that out of deps. Keep our dependencies real simple. Okay, so there we go. We have that. Save. And now I want to run that Dockerfile again. Okay, so now it's doing the thing. So start downloading the dependencies. This takes a second. Okay, so you can kind of see all the stuff that's underneath all those different libraries. Cool. Okay, so built it. Good. Okay, so now we just need to test the container. Okay, actually for that I'm going to open up a proper terminal. Okay, you'll see why. Okay, so to try it out, we're going to do sudo docker run, because before we deploy, we want to make sure that the container actually works. Sudo docker run, and then we want to do -p for port, and we want to say that what this means, the first number is our port. So in our computer, what port do we have to access? The second number is what port is it listening to in the container. So basically, port 4000 on the container is going to show up. It's going to point to port 4000 on our machine. Okay, so we're running this container, and the container, as we named earlier, is Alex Merced / Deno test 3. And again, notice I don't have to be in the same folder anymore because Docker's going to keep all those containers in a little central place on the computer. So it just works. So sudo docker run, I hit enter, do the sudo thing, and that's going to run the container. Just wait for my little 4000 message, and there you go, listening on port 4000. So now let's go back over here. I'm going to close this tab, open up a new tab, just to make sure this is working. Localhost 4000, and it works. Good. Okay, I'm going to do a shift refresh just to be 100% sure. Yes. Okay, it's working. Okay, so that means we can kill this. Okay, so what I need to do is open another tab. I need to take a look at what Docker containers are currently running. So sudo docker ps. Okay, and then here's a list of my different Docker containers. So I can see this Docker container. It's pointing, from 4000 to 4000. Great. And what I want is to get this unique ID number for the container here. I'm going to copy that. And then I'm going to do sudo docker kill. Okay, and that's going to kill the container. And see, stop running. Good, because I don't necessarily need that running forever. Okay, now I can go back over here. Let's start deploying. Okay, we're going to deploy the fly.io. So you need to go to fly.io and sign up, which is going to require you to, you're going to download the fly command line tools, and it'll walk you through all of it. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, but basically once I have that, I'm going to do fly control in the folder that I'm planning to do this in, and I'm going to do fly control apps create. Okay, and this will create a fly.toml file. I'll have to first name it. So we're going to call this am deno test 2. Okay, this is me. Okay, and there it goes. It creates a fly.toml file in the directory. Now here I just need to make a few quick changes. Really the only change here is I just want to make sure that it knows that the internal port is 4000. And aside from that, there's nothing here I really need to change. And what it's going to do is that when I deploy, it's going to use this to kind of find the configurations. It's going to grab the Docker file in that folder, upload it, and deploy it. So now I can just do fly control deploy. Okay, now it's deploying. This will take a bit. Okay, I'll pause this so that way you guys don't have to watch this whole thing. Okay, so that deployment finished. So one desire, one place. Checks one total, one passing. Good. So this is all good. So we should, what was it called? AM Deno test 2. So we should be able to go to AM Deno test 2.fly.io. Again, AM Deno test fly.2.io. Okay, I might be typing in the wrong URL. Let me go back and look up the first one. AM test Deno 1. It's fly.dev, that's why. So that was the one I did before. This is fly.dev is the suffix for. There we go. Hello world, deploy using Docker, Deno, Docker, and fly.io. So we did it. Okay, we created a project using Deno. We made sure that works. Then we made the Docker image. Then we tested that worked. Then we deployed it to fly.io and made sure that works. So there you go. Okay, you have the ability. It's not hard. We did this in half an hour, and that's with me doing a lot of debugging. So you can create your applications using Deno. Main thing is just to make sure that whatever you use as your server, that it serves it on host name 0.0.0.0. Make sure that all your ports match up with how your Docker container is configured, with your configuration files. But you do all that, you should be good to go. Pretty straightforward. So my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.